Hi, I'm Pharaoh, and today I'm asking that age-old question, are we nearly there yet? Because it's kind of going to be asked more and more as we get towards the end of this expedition. And I thought I would do a few predictions and look at yet another spreadsheet, because that's the only real way to do this, I guess. And I don't really want to focus too much on the spreadsheet itself, just the predictions it makes, but I will pull that up in a minute. Because what I've been doing is I've been trying to track some of the data. So in other words, coming here on a regular basis, looking what the percentages are, not the scores, just the percentages, and seeing what the rate of change of those percentages is. And it's not surprising that the percentages started to increase a little bit faster over the weekend. Now, they didn't increase very much on Saturday, but they did increase quite considerably on Sunday. So the most recent data I've got was for Monday and Tuesday, and the average seemed to stay up. So if things are going a little bit faster than last week, are we nearly there yet? And before we really look at the data, I just want to reiterate that we are seeing granular day-to-day, hour-by-hour data. In fact, you can pretty much log out and log back in. In fact, if I do that now, if we look at that, we've got, say, the Sage contribution, which is the team I'm on, which is inevitably going to be last, I think. But the Sage contribution is 18.73%. And if I log out and log back in again, it could... I was going to say should then, but it could change. I don't know quite how fast it updates, but it doesn't seem to be every 8 hours. It seems to actually update during the time we're playing. But I don't think it necessarily updates on screen unless we log out and log back in. So let's try that. 18.73%. So it took a little bit longer than just logging out and logging back in again. But after I recorded this video, I started editing and I thought, oh, I should have checked that. And it's only about 10-15 minutes later, and it has changed very slightly. So it's relatively granular. We can check it every 10 minutes or so, I think. Now, obviously, instead of using this number, which has just been rounded up to the nearest integer, I've been looking at these numbers and adding them together, and they're to the nearest 2 decimal places. So they're a little bit more granular, and we can see things change a little bit more. Hello Games added these more granular numbers just so that we could see things changing, possibly because so many people were saying, oh, it's all fake, it's all on a timer. You don't really need this granularity to see that there are changes depending on days, and that it's not just on a timer. It would have to be a very clever timer for them to just adjust based on the right kind of day, when people might be at home, might not be at home. Predicting human behaviour is actually very difficult, and they're not going to bother. They're just not even going to try to do that. Not least the fact that the data miners have shown over and over again that you can literally ping the server with an update. You can throw a few contributions in and you can watch the number go up very slightly. And the number that they get back is kind of a more accurate number. And also, once they did that and they pinged it with a load of data just to see what would happen, what the rate of change would be, and they didn't realize quite how much they were pinging it, and they ended up pushing something really, really high. So they accidentally increased the rate for something that was not yet unlocked, and they had to apologize to Hello Games well, they didn't have to, but they decided that it was probably the best idea to apologize for Hello Games and let them know that they had artificially increased something because they were messing around with the server, and it literally did change when they sent a few extra contributions in. So we've always known that this isn't fake. I'm fed up with explaining it to people online. It's a fact. People should just go and do some research. It's not that hard to find this data. It's right in front of us here. You can watch it change. One of the things I'd mentioned there was that it's very difficult to predict human behavior. And I mean, people get paid huge amounts of money for working out how numbers like this will change based on human behavior. That's what a large number of people do in financial services. They're looking to see how the numbers change based on what people are doing, and that's a very hard thing to do. a tangent, people that talk about certain games and say, oh, this will all be much better when we've got some kind of load balancing being done by the computer. We'll know exactly what part of a map we're going to be on, and we can adjust dynamically the shards so we know exactly who's in what shard, and we can make the servers much more effective. They're talking absolute nonsense. It would be impossible to do that, because basically everybody that's ever been paid to do that kind of job gets huge sums of money, and in general they know for a fact that it's very difficult and not consistent and very, very difficult, if not impossible, overall, to be any sense of accurate. So here we have some data. And what I've done is I've looked at a very, very approximate estimate. So not only am I not claiming this is going to be how it works out, because as I said, it's very difficult to predict human behavior, but it's a very rough estimate of what I think the current rate of change is per day, which was over the last few days, on average, taking into account differences in weekends and weekdays, about 2.4%. And actually, that's quite high. It has been a lot lower than that. And when I run the data and just go from what we're at the moment down to Monday the 13th, it hits 100%. So we would be finished with a week and 2 days to spare. That would be excellent. It could go faster. It could go slower. But either way, if it goes faster, great. We're nearly there. We're a couple of weeks away, maybe. So I thought, well, let's have a look at what would happen if it went slower. Now, 2% a day, that's actually faster than it has been it was for most of last week. So for most of last week, a few of us were a little bit worried that we weren't going to get there. And when it's running at 2% from current data, it would finish on the Thursday. So giving us a full week from Thursday to Wednesday to complete the expedition. Now, bear in mind, when that counter hits 100%, we still have 3 milestones to do. So it's not like you could just log in on the Wednesday when it finishes and complete it, unless those milestones are very, very quick. And one of them is a fighting one, and I'm not sure how long that will take. I wouldn't imagine it will take that long, but it's not just a matter of logging in, going to the terminal and finishing. You've got to log in and you've got to do 3 separate milestones in order to finish the expedition. So yeah, you'd have plenty of time. Most gamers, if it finished on the Thursday, would be able to finish it by the Wednesday, because there's a weekend in there and maybe 1 day a week when they would normally play. Even if you only played 1 day a week on a specific day, you would probably squeeze that in. Maybe if you were really unlucky and you only ever played on a Wednesday evening, you would kind of come up blank. But other than that, that should work out. If we went down to 1.75 a day, and bear in mind we were roughly at that kind of level. Let me just quickly look back at my data a second. Yeah, at one point we were only at 1.53 a day, so we were worse than that. So if we were at 1.75 a day, we'd finish it easily, but we'd be Sunday morning we'd hit 100%. So that would be a little bit tricky for people that maybe play on a Thursday and a Friday, or only ever play on Saturday. They wouldn't have time to complete the expedition without changing their normal schedule. So they could come up short there. 1.5 a day, and as I was saying, our data suggests that it has been running quite low, around about that. So 1.5 a day based on the current score, we would never hit 100%. We'd only get to 98.76%. Now, that would come up, rounded up, as 99%. That would be incredibly frustrating if everybody saw it get to 99% and nothing happened. We have been predicting that maybe Hello Games would adjust ratios if it looked like we were going to fail. But exactly how they would adjust the ratios, it would be tricky for them to adjust it again, because it's difficult to predict human behaviour. And currently, if it stays where we are now at 2.4%, it wouldn't matter anyway. They've got plenty of time. So they're probably not going to start messing around with anything, slightly adjusting things to help us out. They're just not going to need to. But if things slow down to 1.5% a day, maybe. So we need to keep an eye on that. I mean, I would prefer that they didn't help us out, that we just did it normally. So anybody thinking, is it worth doing? Yeah, of course it's worth doing, because we'd like to have plenty of time to finish it off and walk around in our great new armour and feel good that we actually did the game thing, you know, actually acted like gamers and did the game thing. Sorry if I'm sounding a little bit peeved there, but it really does feel stupid that we're arguing with people about whether or not they should even play the game. Anything lower than 1.5, and we really are starting to take it out to very difficult to complete levels. Even if we had a burst towards the end, if we went right down to 1.25, we'd be struggling. At least if we went down to 1.5 and we were getting quite close, like after the weekend, we were around about 96%. I can imagine a load of people jumping in and just doing a few missions, because there are a lot of people that are genuinely gamers out there that want number go up. They want that kind of satisfaction. So I suspect, and again, it's difficult to predict human behavior, but I would suspect that if we stuck on 1.5 for the next 2 and a bit weeks, by the time we started to approach the 90s, things would increase a bit. We would probably easily do it. But there might be a little bit of a worry for people that only log on once a week. They might miss their opportunity to get the rewards. That would be a bit of a shame. But yeah, anything lower, 1.25, maybe the same, because it gets into the 90s towards the end. Late 80s, people might kind of think, oh yeah, let's do that. But yeah, we really are struggling then. We're only getting to 85% even by the end. So to summarise, if we progress at the current rate that I've been seeing since Thursday until now, which is Wednesday, so I mean not quite a week's worth of data, then we would see us completing it relatively quickly. And I would guess, and I stress it's a guess, that as the number gets higher and we start to see the prismatic core complete just a little bit more, which we're due to see again soon because it should be hitting 60% shortly, then people will see the progress. They'll see that we're getting closer. They will slightly increase their rate of playing it, and we will complete it even before the Monday the 13th. But if we slow down, we run the risk of giving us less time to complete, and it could be a bit awkward for those once-a-week gamers that want to complete it. They're doing everything they can to help us, but they're only really kind of doing, say, 3-6 missions a week. And they would unfortunately have difficulty if it didn't marry up with the days. And then if we slip down to a lower number even than that, 1.5-ish, where we were beginning of last week, that could even cause us to be rushing around at the last minute, desperately trying to finish it off, desperately trying to convince our mates that wanted to know when it was all over that they need to log in quickly and get their rewards. That wouldn't be a very satisfactory thing. And anything lower than that, I think we really would be struggling. So in answer to the initial question, are we nearly there yet? I think we kind of are. I think we're doing all right now. I was worried last week. This week, not so much. I think we're going to be doing it. And I'm pleased to see that the rate has changed a bit and we're getting some work done. And whether that's because of the hot weather and people are staying in rather than going out because it's really hot in some countries at the moment. I've had reports from a number of different people in different countries, but here in the UK, I mean, today is a red warning. We really shouldn't be going out for long periods of time because we would get high ultraviolet and it probably wouldn't be good for us. So staying inside, maybe doing the odd mission during our breaks or whatever we're doing normally, that could be accounting for the increase. And if that continues for a week or two, we'll probably do this easily. But don't be complacent. It's worth doing. We know that it genuinely does increase based on our own effort. Hello Games are quite good at estimating roughly how long it will take, because they've got years of data now. The data that they use is based on all of the Quicksilver stuff they've always done. This is basically just the Quicksilver stuff repurposed. It's exactly the same system, and they're just doing a little bit more calculation as to which team is winning. Now, before I finish, I'm just going to touch on the whole team thing. There's been a few people actually working out some of the data, and they're saying, oh, well, one of the reasons we think it might be a little bit fake is because we don't seem to be seeing many changes in the behavior of the team. So the teams themselves are kind of stuck at where they are in their rankings, and they're not really increasing on each other. And then they look at how many people are on each team. The maths don't really support any of these speculations. If we very quickly look at what's going on in the scores, then from first down to third, we've got the difference of less than 200,000. Now, that might seem a lot, but we're talking in terms of 4 million each. So 200,000 is a smaller percentage of that. But also, you have to look at how these scores are calculated. We've already established in previous video that sabotage missions don't seem to be really contributing anything to the score. Only perhaps a couple of points, if there's any at all. Those couple of points might be coming from somewhere else. But it's basically calculated by the purge and the restore and their various multiples depending on what the missions do. Now, one of the things to bear in mind is these restore missions, they are going to be roughly the same number of missions as the purge. I mean, you can see that they're in the same order. They're about, say that one's about 70,000 difference. That one's about 50,000 difference. The restore missions are going to be of a similar order, but the restore missions give 2 times all of these numbers. So 2 times that plus that plus that. So all of those numbers added together multiplied by 2 to the score. And that's bulking out the score quite considerably on an even level. So we're seeing the scores go up quite a lot every time somebody does, well, if we say took a weekend's amount of data and looked at all of the restore missions, that's bumping up the scores, but not actually changing who's winning. And in effect, what it does is it kind of minimizes the amount difference on the purge mission. It kind of buffers that out a bit, so we don't really see much change. And the rate of change of the actual people catching up is reduced, which means that even if we saw, say, a big move by a team on a Discord, say a Sage team on a Discord, and they all got together and said, let's do loads of missions this weekend, it probably would be buffered out by all the restore missions that were going on. And we wouldn't really see any real changes between the scores. It would reduce the net effect. It would reduce the visibility of the progress you are making. And the way I see it, that has a negative impact on people feeling like they can really change how well they're doing. So if you're Sage, for instance, I feel like the restore missions buffering the scores is having a negative impact on people thinking that they can win if they're Sage. Even though, if you look at it, there's only, say, 50,000 between purge and restore, and that really wouldn't be that many missions. Obviously, both teams are going to be competing at the same time, and the restore is going to kind of keep that gap looking artificially wider than it really is. So I feel like psychologically this game is rigged. It's not rigged in terms of how many players are in each team, although there are differences, obviously. It's really rigged in the psychology of the game, that you don't really feel like you're making much progress and kind of taking another team down. And especially when the sabotage missions don't seem to be doing an awful lot either. I mean, they don't seem to be changing anything in the scores. So it's not like you could get together with the Sages and the Royals could get together and defeat Weavers by all focusing on sabotage missions for a week. Because that really wouldn't change much. And also they'd be hurting each other. It feels like the sabotage missions could have been maybe structured a bit better. And that may be one reason why Hello Games ended up just taking that out of the equation before we started. I don't know. Maybe they should have said that the sabotage missions, we could choose which team we took points off of. That could have worked quite nicely. But I think they didn't really want it to be that competitive. But I do feel like psychologically the game's rigged, and I don't think Hello Games really realised that before they started. I don't feel like they realised that it would be this consistent just based on one team being slightly more people than another. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the current stats in the expedition. It looks like we're going relatively good speed at the moment. I hope it stays that way. And it looks to me like inevitably the points will probably remain the same. I mean, go Sages, but, I don't think it's going to change. Anyway, I've been Pharaoh. Travel well, and goodbye for now.